Hey guys, tonight we slip into the rugged, briny world of a Viking village, where the air smells of salt and pine, and the wind carries a chill that nibbles at your ears. Picture yourself standing on a rocky shore, boots sinking into damp pebbles, as longships bob in the fjord like sleepy giants. The skies are moody grey, streaked with gold where the sun dares to peek through. You're not exactly dressed for this, your modern hoodie would raise some eyebrows among these fur-clad Norse folk. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week here without a crash course in axe wielding or at least learning how to stomach fermented fish. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first steps into this Viking village, somewhere along a Norwegian fjord around 850 CE. The path beneath your feet is a mix of mud and straw, churned by boots and cartwheels. Smoke curls from the thatched roofs of longhouses, their wooden frames hunched like old men against the wind. You hear the distant clang of a hammer, the bleat of a goat, and the low hum of voices, some laughing, some arguing over a trade. The air's thick with the scent of burning wood and something earthier, maybe wet wool or fresh-caught cod drying on racks nearby. You pull your cloak tighter, let's pretend you traded that hoodie for something more period-appropriate, and head toward the heart of the village. As you walk, you notice the villagers' curious glances. A woman with braids coiled like ropes pauses her work, her hands dusted with flour from grinding barley. She squints at you, probably wondering if you're a trader or just lost. You give a sheepish wave, and she snorts, turning back to her task. Don't take it personally, hospitality here comes with a side of suspicion. The Vikings were a practical bunch, after all. Historical records show they built tight-knit communities, often housing 30 to 50 people in a single longhouse, sharing space with livestock and stores of grain. Everyone had a role, from the jarl, the local chief, to the thralls, enslaved workers who kept the village humming. But here's a quirky detail: these folks were obsessed with grooming. You spot a man combing his beard with a bone comb, his fingers working with the care of a modern barber. Archaeologists have dug up combs, tweezers, even ear cleaners in Viking graves, proof they liked to look sharp, even if their idea of sharp included a dagger tucked in their belt. You can almost hear the snarky Viking stylist muttering, "Hold still, or I'll trim more than your beard." It's a far cry from the grubby barbarian stereotype, isn't it? You keep moving, drawn to a cluster of longhouses where smoke rises in lazy spirals. The village feels alive, a mix of chaos and rhythm. Children dart past, chasing a leather ball, their laughter cutting through the wind. A dog, shaggy, with eyes like a con artist, trots alongside you, probably hoping you'll drop some bread. You don't have any, but you give it a pat, and it bounds off toward a pile of fishnets. The fjord glitters to your left, its surface rippling like a sheet of dark glass. You wonder how anyone could leave this place, but historians still debate why so many Vikings did. Was it overpopulation, a thirst for adventure, or just the promise of better loot across the sea? You approach the largest longhouse, its doorframe carved with swirling knots that look like they're dancing in the dim light. The carvings aren't just decor, they're a flex, showing off the owner's wealth and status. You push open the heavy door, and a wave of warmth hits you, a firelight, the smell of roasted meat, and the low murmur of voices. Inside, the longhouse is a world of its own, a cavernous space where shadows flicker on timber walls. You're not sure what's next, but you feel the pull of the hearth, where stories and secrets are shared. For now, you're just a visitor, wide-eyed and a little out of place, but ready to soak in the rhythm of Viking life. The floor beneath you is packed earth, scattered with rushes that crunch softly underfoot. You sidestep a sleeping cat, its tail twitching like it's dreaming of a raid. The longhouse is long, hence the name, stretching maybe 60 feet, with benches lining the walls. Furs and woven blankets are draped everywhere, softening the hard edges of this world. You spot a loom in one corner, half-finished cloth hanging like a promise. The air's warm but heavy, thick with the scent of smoke and something sweet, maybe honeyed mead. You're tempted to linger, but the hearth calls, its glow like a beacon in the gloom. You weave through the crowd, warriors, weavers, even a kid gnawing on a hunk of bread. Everyone's busy, yet there's a slowness to it, a deliberate pace that feels almost meditative. You catch a whiff of irony. Modern life, with all its gadgets, could learn a thing or two from this unhurried chaos. A woman by the fire beckons you closer, her eyes crinkling with a mix of amusement and pity. You look cold, she says, or at least you imagine she does. Language barriers are tricky, but her gesture is clear. She hands you a wooden cup, warm to the touch. You take a sip, expecting water, but it's mead, sweet and strong enough to make you blink. You cough, and she laughs, a sound like pebbles rolling in a stream. You settle on a bench, the wood worn smooth by years of use. The fire crackles, spitting sparks that drift upward like tiny stars. You're starting to feel the village's pulse, its blend of grit and warmth. The Vikings weren't just raiders, they were farmers, traders, storytellers. They built ships that crossed oceans and homes that withstood brutal winters. But that horned helmet myth? You'll get to that soon enough. For now, you let the fire's glow and the mead's warmth pull you deeper into this world, ready to see what the next corner of the longhouse holds. You're seated now, the wooden bench creaking under you as the longhouse's warmth wraps around like a heavy blanket. The fire in the hearth pops and hisses, sending shadows dancing across the timber walls, where tools and shields hang like silent sentinels. The air's a heady mix of smoke, roasted meat, and the faint tang of damp wool. You clutch your cup of mead, its sweetness lingering on your tongue, and let your eyes wander. The longhouse is a hive of quiet activity, people move with purpose, but there's no rush, no frantic ticking of a clock. It's as if time here stretches like the fjord outside, slow and endless. You half expect someone to pull out a smartphone, but no, this is 850 CE, and the only notifications are the crackle of the fire and the occasional bleat of a goat from the far end of the room. You shift on the bench, noticing how the rushes on the floor stick to your boots. A woman across from you stirs a cauldron, her movement steady, almost hypnotic. She's humming something low and rhythmic, a tune that feels older than the hills. You're tempted to ask her about it, but you're not sure you'd understand the answer. Instead, you watch as she tosses in a handful of herbs, the scent of thyme cutting through the smokiness. Viking life, you realize, was as much about these small, grounded moments as it was about epic raids. Historical records confirm that longhouses were the heart of Norse communities, often housing entire extended families, sometimes up to 50 people, along with their animals. The livestock lived at one end, separated by a low partition, which explains the faint whiff of manure you're trying to ignore. Here's a quirky tidbit: Vikings were weirdly fastidious about their floors. Archaeologists have found evidence of swept and layered rushes, sometimes mixed with sweet herbs to keep the place smelling, well, less like a barn. You glance down, wondering if the rushes under your feet hide a sprig of lavender or something equally surprising. It's a small detail, but it makes you chuckle. Imagine a burly Viking warrior fussing over floor decor like he's staging an open house. You picture him muttering, "No, no," the time goes under the straw, and you stifle a laugh, earning a curious look from a kid nearby. The kid, maybe 10, is carving a stick with a small knife, his tongue poking out in concentration. You lean closer, catching the scent of fresh wood shavings. He's etching what looks like a tiny ship, its prow curved like the longships outside. You point at it, raising an eyebrow, and he grins, holding it up proudly. "For the sea," he says, or at least you think he does. "Your old Norse is rusty." You nod, impressed, and he goes back to his work, leaving you to wonder about the stories these kids grew up on. Did they dream of sailing to distant lands, or were they just hoping to survive another winter? Historians still debate how much Viking children knew of their parents' far-flung adventures. Were they raised on tales of glory, or was life too practical for such romance? You turn back to the hearth, where the woman with the cauldron is now ladling out portions of something thick and steaming. She hands you a wooden bowl, and you peer inside. Barley porridge, studded with bits of dried fish and herbs. It's not exactly gourmet, but it's warm, and you're hungrier than you realized. You take a spoonful, the texture hearty and the flavor surprisingly rich, like it's carrying the memory of the sea. The woman watches you, her eyes twinkling with what might be amusement. Eat slow, she seems to say, or you'll choke before the school starts. You nod, grateful, and take her advice, savoring the warmth as it spreads through you. Around you, the longhouse hums with soft conversations. A man with a braided beard is mending a net, his fingers moving with the ease of practice. Two women nearby are sorting through a pile of wool, their laughter sharp and quick, like they're sharing a private joke. You catch a snippet about someone's cow wandering into the wrong yard, and you smile. Village gossip hasn't changed much in 1,000 years. The firelight paints everyone in soft golds and oranges, and for a moment, you feel like you belong here, wrapped in the slow rhythm of their world. It's a stark contrast to the modern hustle you're used to, where every second is scheduled. You wonder if you could hack it here, trading deadlines for the daily grind of survival. Probably not, you admit, picturing yourself trying to milk a goat and failing spectacularly. The fire cracks again, louder this time, and you notice a man standing near it, his cloak pinned with a bronze brooch that glints like a tiny sun. He's older, his face lined like a well-read map, and he's holding a staff carved with runes. The room quiets slightly as he clears his throat, and you realize he's about to speak, maybe a story, maybe something else. You lean forward, the bowl of porridge forgotten in your hands. The air feels heavier now, charged with anticipation, and you sense this is why you're here, to hear the tales that keep this village alive, the ones that explain who these people are and why they carve ships into sticks and stare at the stars. You settle in, ready to listen, as the firelight flickers and the longhouse holds you close. You're still cradling the warm bowl of porridge, its steam curling up like a lazy ghost, as the longhouse hums around you. The fire's glow bathes the room in a soft amber, and the old man with the rune-carved staff has just begun speaking, his voice low and gravelly, like stones tumbling in a stream. But your attention drifts to a corner of the longhouse where a group of women are gathered, their hands busy with spindles and looms. You set your bowl down on the bench, careful not to spill, and wander closer, drawn by the rhythmic clack of wood and the faint hum of their chatter. The air here smells of wool and lanolin, a rich, earthy scent that clings to your cloak. You're in a Viking village, somewhere around 850 CE, and you're about to discover that these people were as skilled with thread as they were with axes. You stand near the group, trying not to look too out of place. One woman, her hair woven into a braid thick as a ship's rope, glances up and nods, as if inviting you to watch. She's spinning wool, her fingers deftly twisting fibers into thread on a drop spindle that twirls like a tiny planet. You're mesmerized by the motion, it's almost meditative, the way the spindle dances in her hand. You try to mimic her, picking up a spare spindle from a basket, but your attempt is more like a toddler flailing with a toy. The women chuckle, not unkindly, and one of them, her face freckled like a starry sky, hands you a lump of raw wool. "Start here," she seems to say, her eyes crinkling with amusement. You fumble with it, feeling about as graceful as a goat on ice, and they laugh again, the sound soft and warm. Viking women, you learn, were the backbone of textile production, a fact backed by archaeological finds of looms and spindle whorls in nearly every Norse settlement. They spun wool from sheep raised on these rugged hills, dyed it with plants like woad for blue and madder for red, and wove it into cloth that was both practical and beautiful. You notice the cloth on the loom nearby, its pattern a dazzling mix of diamonds and stripes in vibrant greens and yellows. It's not just fabric, it's art, the kind of thing you'd see in a museum and think, how did they do that without a YouTube tutorial? You run your fingers over the edge of the cloth, marveling at its tightness, and imagine some Viking warrior strutting around in a cloak made from this, looking like a medieval fashion influencer. Here's a quirky detail: Vikings loved bright colors so much that they'd trade across continents for dyes. Excavations have uncovered traces of imported dyes like kermes, a red pigment from Mediterranean insects, in Norse textiles. You picture a trader sailing halfway across the known world just to score some bug juice for a snazzy tunic, and you stifle a grin. Hope it was worth the seasickness, you mutter under your breath, earning a curious look from the freckled woman. She probably thinks you're muttering about the weather, which, to be fair, is a safe bet in Norway. You try your hand at the spindle again, and this time, you manage a wobbly thread that looks like it's having an identity crisis. The women nod encouragingly, but you're pretty sure they're just being polite. You hand the spindle back, deciding to stick to observing for now. The loom's rhythmic clack draws you in again, and you watch as another woman weaves, her hands moving like they're conducting an orchestra. The cloth grows inch by inch, each thread locking into place with a precision that feels almost sacred. You wonder about the stories woven into these patterns. Did they encode family histories, or were they just showing off? Historians still debate whether Viking textiles carried symbolic meanings, like runes or sagas stitched into wool. It's a mystery that makes you lean closer, as if the cloth might whisper its secrets. The firelight catches the colors of the fabric, making them glow like stained glass. You notice a younger girl, maybe 12, practicing on a smaller loom, her brow furrowed in concentration. She's weaving a narrow band, maybe for a belt, and you can't help but admire her focus. You think about your own world, where distractions ping every 5 seconds, and wonder if you could ever muster that kind of patience. Probably not. You'd be checking your phone for weaving tips by now. The girl glances up, catches you staring, and sticks out her tongue, a universal sign of mind your own business. You laugh, raising your hands in mock surrender, and step back to give her space. The air feels warmer now, the longhouse's energy shifting as more people gather near the hearth. You hear the old man's voice again, rising and falling like a tide, and realize he's still telling his story. You're tempted to return to the fire, but the women's work holds you for a moment longer. You spot a basket of dyed wool, blues, reds, and golds piled like a painter's palette, and imagine the fields and forests these colors came from. It's a reminder that this village, for all its ruggedness, was connected to a wider world, trading and thriving in ways you hadn't expected. You take one last look at the loom, its pattern growing under skilled hands, and feel a strange pang of gratitude for these women, whose work clothed a civilization. The hearth calls you back now, its glow promising more stories, and you step away, ready to sink deeper into the night. You ease away from the looms, the rhythmic clack of wood fading as you weave through the longhouse's warm haze, drawn back toward the hearth's glow. The air carries the scent of wool and herbs, but now there's a sharper note, iron, maybe, or leather, tickling your nose. You spot a corner of the longhouse where a warrior's gear is neatly arranged, a shield propped against the wall, its wood chipped from use, a sword resting in a leather sheath, and a helmet glinting dully in the firelight. You pause, your curiosity snagged. This is it, the moment to unravel that horned helmet myth that's been nagging at you. You step closer, the floor's rushes crunching under your boots, and feel like a detective about to debunk a 1,000-year-old rumor. Spoiler alert, you're not going to find any horns here, unless you count the drinking horn some guys waving around by the fire. You crouch beside the gear, careful not to knock anything over. The helmet is a simple dome of iron, scuffed and dented like it's seen a few fights. No horns, no wings, just practical metal design to keep a skull intact. You run your fingers over its smooth curve, imagining the weight of it on your head. It's heavier than it looks, kind of like your uncle's old motorcycle helmet, but less likely to spark a midlife crisis. You grin at the thought, picturing a Viking warrior striding into battle, only to trip over his own ego. The truth is, historical evidence from Viking graves and art, like the Osberg tapestry, shows helmets were plain, often with a nasal guard or cheek plates. Horned helmets? Pure fantasy, cooked up by 19th-century opera costumes and overzealous artists who thought Vikings needed extra flair. But here's the quirky bit, while horns were a no-go, some helmets had decorative crests or animal motifs etched into the metal. You squint at the helmet in front of you, noticing faint scratches that might be a stylized wolf or raven. It's hard to tell in the dim light, but it's enough to make you wonder if this warrior was trying to channel Odin's vibes. You imagine him polishing it obsessively, muttering, "Gotta look fierce for the next raid," while his buddies roll their eyes. The idea of Vikings as image-conscious makes you chuckle, and you glance around, half expecting someone to shush you for disturbing the longhouse's vibe. You shift your attention to the shield, its surface painted with faded red and black spirals. It's lighter than you expected, made of wood with an iron boss in the center, perfect for bashing or blocking. You heft it, feeling a bit like a kid playing superhero, and immediately regret it when a nearby warrior, a burly guy with a beard like a bird's nest, raises an eyebrow. You set the shield down quickly, mumbling an imaginary apology in Old Norse. He grunts and turns back to his mead, probably thinking you're some weird trader with no manners. You're starting to realize that Viking gear was all about function over flash. Shields were often replaced after a single battle, their wood splintering under axe blows. Yet, historians still wonder if the designs painted on them held deeper meaning. Were those spirals just for show, or did they carry clan symbols, like a medieval version of a logo? You linger by the gear, noticing a leather belt studded with bronze. It's heavy with pouches and a small knife, the kind of multi-tool setup that screams ready for anything. You're tempted to try it on, but the warrior's still watching, and you're not keen on testing Viking hospitality. Instead, you imagine strapping on this gear and heading out to sea, the fjords chill biting at your face. Would you have the guts to raid a distant shore, or would you be the one hiding behind the shield, praying for a calm voyage? You're leaning toward the latter, especially after that mead went straight to your head. The longhouse feels quieter now, the fire's crackle blending with the old man's storytelling voice from across the room. You glance back at the helmet, its plainness oddly comforting. It's a reminder that Vikings were practical people, not the cartoonish barbarians of modern myth. The horned helmet idea, fun as it is, was a marketing ploy that stuck, like branding Vikings as the rock stars of the Dark Ages. You stand, brushing rush fragments from your cloak, and feel a tug of curiosity about the ships these warriors sailed. The fjord outside is calling, its longships waiting like silent promises of adventure. You step away from the gear, the helmet's weight still lingering in your mind, and head toward the door, ready to see what the shipyard holds. You push through the longhouse door, the cool air of the fjord hitting you like a gentle slap. The scent of pine and salt washes over you, mingling with the faint tang of pitch from the shipyard just down the hill. Your boots crunch on the pebbled path as you make your way toward the water, where longships rest like sleeping dragons, their curved prows slicing the twilight sky. The village hums behind you, but out here, it's just you, the wind, and the rhythmic lap of waves against wood. You're in a Viking shipyard around 850 CE, and the sight before you, half-built hulls, stacks of timber, and workers moving with quiet purpose, feels like stumbling into a workshop where history is carved. You pull your cloak tighter, wishing you'd grabbed another cup of that mead to ward off the chill, and step closer to the action, hoping you don't look too much like a tourist. The shipyard is alive with controlled chaos. Men and women hammer and saw, their movement steady, like they're dancing to a song only they can hear. You spot a half-finished longship, its skeleton of oak ribs rising from a keel that looks sturdy enough to laugh at storms. You run your hand along a plank, smooth from careful sanding, and marvel at the craftsmanship. Viking shipbuilding was a masterclass in engineering. Historical records show their longships, like the Gokstad ship, were clinker-built, with overlapping planks riveted together for flexibility and strength, letting them glide across oceans and rivers alike. You imagine trying to swing a hammer here, only to accidentally sink someone's pride and joy. "Sorry, lads, I'm more of a desk job guy," you mutter, earning a curious glance from a nearby worker with sawdust in his beard. Here's a quirky detail: Vikings used wool soaked in tar to caulk their ships, stuffing it between planks to keep them watertight. You spot a woman nearby, her hands black with pitch, pressing wool into a seam with the focus of a surgeon. You picture her muttering, "If this leaks, I'm not the one swimming to Denmark," and you stifle a laugh. The idea of wool, the same stuff you saw being spun in the longhouse, doubling as ship sealant is oddly charming, like Vikings were the ultimate recyclers, turning sheep fluff into seafaring magic. You step closer, watching her work, and notice the faint smell of charred wood from a fire where planks are being steamed to bend them into shape. You wander along the ship's length, its prow carved with a serpent's head that seems to glare at the fjord. The carving's not just for show, it's meant to ward off sea spirits, or maybe just intimidate rival crews. You're tempted to pat the serpent's snout for luck, but a worker nearby is wielding an axe with unsettling precision, so you keep your hands to yourself. You wonder what it felt like to board one of these ships, knowing you might not see home for months, or ever. Historians still debate what drove Vikings to sail so far: greed, glory, or just the itch to see what's beyond the horizon. The question hangs in the air as you watch a young man, barely older than a teenager, hoist a plank onto his shoulder, his face set with determination. The fjord glitters under the fading light, and you pause to take it in. The water's dark, almost black, but it catches the sky's colors like a mirror, reflecting pinks and purples that make you forget the cold for a moment. You spot a Finnish longship bobbing nearby, its sail furled but ready, like it's waiting for the next adventure. You imagine climbing aboard, feeling the deck sway beneath you, and immediately regret the thought. You get queasy just thinking about a ferry ride. Still, there's something magnetic about these ships, their sleek lines promising speed and stories. You picture a Viking captain, all swagger and salt-crusted beard, barking orders while you cling to the mast, praying for dry land. At the shipyard sounds, hammering, soaring, the occasional shout, blend into a soothing rhythm, like a heartbeat you didn't know you needed. You notice a pile of tools nearby, adzes, augers, and chisels, each worn from use but cared for like family heirlooms. You pick up an adze, its handle smooth from countless hands, and give it an experimental swing, nearly clipping your own shin. "Yeah, let's leave that to the pros," you say to no one, setting it down quickly. The workers don't notice, too focused on their tasks, and you're grateful for their indifference. As the light fades, the shipyard feels like a bridge between this village and the vast world beyond, and you sense the pull of the fjord, urging you toward the feast waiting back in the village. You turn from the ships, their prows whispering of voyages yet to come, and head uphill, ready for whatever the night brings. You trudge back up the hill from the shipyard, the fjord's chill clinging to your cloak as the village comes into view, its longhouses glowing like lanterns against the deepening dusk. The air carries the scent of smoke and something richer, roasted fish, maybe, or bread fresh from the fire. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you of the porridge you left half-eaten in the longhouse. You're headed to a Viking feast now, the kind where tables groan under the weight of food and stories flow as freely as mead. The path levels out, and you hear laughter and the clink of wooden cups before you even reach the door. You step inside, the warmth hitting you like a hug, and find the longhouse transformed into a bustling hall of celebration. You're in 850 CE, and tonight, you're not just a visitor, you're part of the feast. Whether you're ready for the fishy flavors or not, the longhouse is packed, benches filled with villagers shoulder to shoulder, their faces lit by the hearth's glow. You squeeze onto a bench, your knees bumping against a table laden with platters of smoked herring, barley bread, and steaming bowls of stew thick with root vegetables. A woman with flour-dusted hands plunks a wooden plate in front of you, piled high with fish so fresh it smells like the fjord itself. You hesitate, eyeing the herring's glassy stare, and wonder if you can fake enthusiasm for this. "Eat up," she says, or at least her grin suggests it, and you nod, hoping your modern taste buds don't betray you. You take a bite, and it's surprisingly good, salty, smoky, with a tang that wakes you up. You imagine texting your friends, "Just ate Viking fish, 10 tenths, no Wi-Fi," and chuckle, earning a curious look from the guy next to you. Viking feasts were central to Norse social life, historical records show, serving as gatherings for everything from weddings to trade deals. They weren't just about food, they were about bonding, boasting, and sometimes settling scores without drawing blood. You notice the spread includes more than fish, there's cheese, soft and crumbly, and a bowl of skyr, a yogurt-like dish that's sharper than you expected. You scoop some onto your bread, feeling oddly proud of your Viking dining skills, though you're pretty sure you're holding the spoon wrong. The guy next to you, his beard braided with tiny beads, raises his cup in a toast, and you mimic him, hoping you're not accidentally pledging your life to a raid. Here's the quirky detail: Vikings loved their dairy so much they'd churn butter in massive wooden vats, sometimes flavoring it with herbs or even seaweed. You spot a small dish of butter on the table, flecked with green, and spread some on your bread. It's rich, almost nutty, and you imagine a Viking dairy farmer proudly presenting his masterpiece, saying, "This butter's been to more battles than you." You stifle a laugh, nearly choking on your bread, and the bearded guy claps you on the back, probably thinking you're just overwhelmed by the feast's grandeur. You're not, but you let him think so. It's easier than explaining your weird sense of humor. You lean back, taking in the scene. A skald, his voice rising like a tide, is reciting a poem about a hero who outwitted a sea monster. The crowd cheers, cups clinking, and you join in, feeling the mead loosen your shoulders. The feast is loud but not chaotic, a balance of joy and order that makes you wonder how they pulled it off without modern conveniences. You picture yourself trying to host this, forgetting half the dishes and burning the fish. Historians still debate how much of Viking feasting was about status. Did they pile on the food to flex their wealth, or was it just about feeding the community? The question lingers as you take another sip of mead, its warmth spreading like a cozy blanket. A child darts past, snatching a piece of bread from the table, and you smile, remembering the kid carving a ship earlier. The energy here is infectious, a mix of laughter and stories that makes the longhouse feel like the heart of the world. You notice a woman across the table, her fingers stained with berry juice, passing around a bowl of dried apples. You take one, its sweetness cutting through the fishy aftertaste, and thank her with a nod. She winks, like she knows you're out of your depth but approves of your effort. The feast stretches on, and you feel yourself sinking into its rhythm, the clatter of plates and the skald's voice weaving a spell. Outside, the fjord waits, but for now, you're content to stay, letting the feast carry you deeper into the night. You're still basking in the feast's warmth, the taste of smoked herring and sweet mead lingering as you lean back on the bench, the longhouse's smoky air wrapping you like a soft fog. The skald's voice has faded, replaced by the low hum of conversation and the occasional clink of cups. You feel full, maybe a little too full, and decide to stretch your legs. You slip out of the longhouse, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the hearth's glow. The village is quieter now, the fjord's dark water glinting under a sky dusted with stars. You wander toward a clearing where a tall, weathered stone looms, its surface carved with swirling runes that catch the moonlight. You're in 850 CE, and these runestones, you're about to learn, are more than just rocks, they are stories etched in stone, puzzles that whisper of Viking lives. You run your fingers over the carvings, half expecting them to spill their secrets, and chuckle at the thought of texting, found a Viking tweet, no emojis. The runestone stands like a silent giant, its surface rough under your touch. The carvings are intricate, loops, knots, and angular letters that look like they're dancing in the dim light. You squint, trying to make sense of them, but Old Norse isn't exactly your strong suit. You imagine yourself as a Viking scholar, dramatically declaring, "Aha!" It says something about a goat. You laugh, the sound echoing softly in the quiet night. Historical records show runestones were raised to honor the dead, mark deeds, or claim land, often commissioned by families to brag about their kin. This one, you guess, might commemorate a warrior or a lost son, its runes spelling out a saga of bravery or loss. Here's a quirky detail, some runestones include curses to deter vandals. Archaeologists have found inscriptions warning that anyone who defaces the stone will face bad luck, or worse. You glance around, half expecting a ghostly Viking to pop out and scold you for touching his memorial. Relax, I'm just admiring, you mutter, stepping back to avoid tempting fate. The idea of a Viking cursing a rock like it's a medieval security system makes you grin, and you wonder if the guy who carved this was chuckling as he added the hex. You circle the stone, noticing a smaller carving, a ship with a curled prow, like the ones you saw in the shipyard. It's a reminder of how central the sea was to these people, their lives tethered to its whims. You try to picture the person this stone honors, a warrior who sailed to distant shores, or maybe just a farmer who loved his fjord. The runes don't tell you much, but their mystery pulls you in. Historians still wonder how many stories were lost because not all Vikings could read runes, only a few skilled carvers held that knowledge. Did the villagers here gather to hear the stone's message read aloud, or was it enough to know it stood as a marker of their past? The night air feels colder now, and you pull your cloak tighter, the wool scratching softly against your neck. You hear a rustle nearby, a fox, maybe, darting through the grass, and it startles you just enough to make you laugh at your own jumpiness. You're not cut out for Viking nights, clearly, with your modern reliance on streetlights and central heating. You imagine trying to explain to a Viking why you need a flashlight to wander around, and the thought of their baffled faces keeps you grinning. The runestone looms before you, its carvings seeming to shift in the moonlight, and you feel a strange connection to it, like you're touching a piece of time itself. You sit on a nearby rock, the chill seeping through your cloak, and let the stone's presence sink in. The village feels distant now, its lights and laughter muffled by the night. You spot another runestone in the distance, smaller but just as intricate, and wonder how many stories this clearing holds. The air smells of damp earth and pine, and you breathe deeply, letting the stillness settle your thoughts. You're starting to understand why the Vikings carved these stones, not just for memory, but for permanence, a way to say, "We were here." The fjord's soft lapping echoes in the background, and you feel the pull of the village again, its warmth calling you back. You stand, giving the runestone one last look, and head toward the longhouse, ready for the stories that wait under the stars. You slip back toward the longhouse, the runestone's cryptic carving still lingering in your mind like a half-remembered dream, but the night's chill urges you to seek the warmth of the village. The sky above is a deep velvet, studded with stars that seem to pulse with stories of their own. You pause outside the longhouse, the muffled laughter and clatter of cups seeping through the door, and notice a small group gathered in a clearing nearby, their faces lit by a flickering bonfire. A skald stands among them, his cloak billowing as he gestures to the heavens, his voice weaving tales of gods and giants. You're in 850 CE, and tonight, under these starlit skies, you're about to hear the myths that shaped the Viking world. You edge closer, the grass damp under your boots, and settle near the fire, hoping you don't look too much like a starry-eyed outsider. You mutter to yourself, "If I fall asleep during this, don't let Odin smite me," and grin at your own melodrama. The skald's voice is rich, like honey poured over gravel, and he's deep into a story about Odin, the one-eyed all-father who traded his eye for wisdom. You lean forward, the bonfire's heat kissing your face, and let the words wash over you. The Vikings believed their gods were as flawed as humans, full of cunning and chaos. Odin, for instance, was a wanderer, a trickster, and a poet, not some untouchable deity. Historical records, like the Poetic Edda, show these myths were passed down orally, with skalds as the keepers of Norse lore, their tales binding communities like thread through wool. You imagine trying to memorize a saga yourself, only to butcher it in front of this crowd. Yeah, and then fought a big snake. You picture yourself mumbling, earning groans from the audience. Here's a quirky detail: Vikings sometimes carved tiny amulets of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, to wear for protection, and archaeologists have found them tucked into graves or lost in market stalls. You notice a woman nearby fingering a small pendant at her neck, its hammer shape catching the firelight. You wonder if she's praying for a safe voyage or just hedging her bets against a stormy night. The thought makes you chuckle. Imagine a Viking version of a lucky rabbit's foot, but with more thunder god vibes. You pat your own empty pockets, wishing you had a charm to fend off your modern anxieties, like forgetting your phone charger. The skald shifts to a tale of Loki, the shape-shifting troublemaker, who once turned into a mare to distract a giant's horse. The crowd roars with laughter, and you join in, picturing Loki's smug grin as he trots off, leaving chaos in his wake. The story's absurdity feels like a warm blanket, pulling you deeper into the night spell. You glance at the stars, wondering which ones the Vikings thought were God's eyes watching them. Historians still debate how much of these myths were literal beliefs versus poetic metaphors. Did the Vikings really expect Thor to swing his hammer during a storm, or was it just a way to make sense of the thunder? The question hangs like the smoke curling above the fire. You shift on the grass, your cloak damp from the ground, and notice a kid nearby, wide-eyed, hanging on the skald's every word. You remember the boy carving a ship in the longhouse, and wonder if he's dreaming of meeting Odin himself one day. The fire cracks, sending sparks skyward, and you feel a strange calm, like the stars are whispering back. The skald's voice dips, now telling of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects all realms. You imagine its roots stretching beneath you, tying this moment to every other, and it's oddly soothing, like the universe is bigger than your worries. You picture explaining this to your friends. "Yeah, I chilled with Vikings under a cosmic tree," and laugh softly, earning a curious glance from the kid. The bonfire's warmth fights off the night's chill, and you pull your knees up, letting the skald's words paint pictures in your mind. The crowd is rapt, their faces glowing with pride and wonder, and you feel it too, a connection to something ancient, something shared. The fjord's soft lapping blends with the skald's voice, and you sense the village waking up beyond the fire, its market stirring for tomorrow's bustle. You're not ready to leave this starry circle yet, but the promise of the morning pulls at you like a tide urging you toward the next chapter of this Viking night. You linger by the bonfire a moment longer, the scald's tales of gods and giants fading into the crackle of flames, but the village's morning pulse tugs you away. The stars still glitter overhead, but a faint grey creeps into the sky, hinting at dawn. You stand, brushing damp grass from your cloak, and wander toward the heart of the village, where the market is stirring to life. The air smells of fresh bread, wet earth, and the sharp tang of fish being unloaded from a cart. Stalls are being set up, their wooden frames creaking as traders arrange goods, furs, amber beads, and strange trinkets from lands you can't even name. You're in 850 CE, and this Viking market is a bustling crossroads of the Norse world, where you're about to haggle like your life depends on it. You pat your empty pockets, muttering, hope they take IOUs, and grin at the thought of bartering with your questionable charm you weave through the crowd, your boots sinking into the muddy path as traders call out in a mix of boasts and banter. A burly man with a scar across his cheek waves a bundle of furs at you, wolf, maybe, or fox, its softness tempting but way out of your imaginary budget. You shake your head, and he shrugs, already turning to a more promising customer. Historical records, like accounts from Viking trade hubs like Hedeby, show these markets were global melting pots, with goods from as far as Byzantium and the Silk Road. You spot a glint of green glass beads on a stall, likely from the Mediterranean, and marvel at how far they've traveled to end up here, in this muddy Norse village. Here's a quirky detail: Vikings sometimes used hack silver, chunks of cut-up silver jewelry, as currency, weighing it on tiny scales to settle deals. You watch a woman with braided hair pull out a small pouch, tipping out silver scraps to pay for a clay pot. You imagine trying to buy coffee with broken earrings back home, picturing the barista's baffled face, and chuckle softly. The woman glances at you, probably thinking you're laughing at her haggling skills, and you offer a sheepish smile, hoping you haven't just insulted her entire family. You move on, drawn to a stall piled with dried herbs and small leather pouches, their earthy scent cutting through the fishy air. You pause to inspect a carved wooden comb, its teeth fine enough to tame even the wildest Viking beard. The trader, a wiry man with a grin like he knows all your secrets, nudges you to try it. You hesitate, running your fingers through your hair and realizing it's probably a mess after a night by the fjord. Not sure I'm ready for Viking salon life, you mutter, but you give the comb a test run, feeling oddly fancy. The crowd around you is a mix of locals and travelers, some in rough wool, others in finer cloaks that scream I've been to Constantinople. You wonder how many of these traders have sailed across seas or trekked overland, swapping stories as often as goods. Historians still debate how much of Viking trade was peaceful exchange versus raid-fueled looting. Did this market thrive on trust or fear? You try your hand at haggling, pointing at a small amber pendant shaped like a fish. The trader raises an eyebrow, naming a price in silver you definitely don't have. You gesture vaguely, hoping to charm your way into a deal, but he laughs, shaking his head. You're no Viking merchant. Clearly, your negotiation skills are about as sharp as a butter knife. You step back, letting a more confident buyer take over, and watch the market's rhythm, the clink of scales, the rustle of furs, the shouts of deals being struck. It's chaotic but alive, like a song with too many instruments but a perfect beat. You imagine trying to explain this to your friends. Yeah, I shopped at a Viking flea market, no big deal, and grin at the thought the sun's higher now, warming the air and casting long shadows across the stalls. You notice a kid darting through the crowd, clutching a loaf of bread he probably swiped, and you can't help but root for him. The market feels like the village's heartbeat, a place where stories and goods change hands under the open sky. You spot a trader unpacking a bundle of silk, its sheen catching the light, and wonder about the roads it traveled to get here. The fjord glints nearby, its waves whispering of the ships that brought these treasures. You feel the pull of the village's quieter corners now, the promise of new sights, and step away from the market, ready to see what else this day holds. You drift away from the market's lively clamor, the shouts of traders and clink of silver fading as you follow a narrow path toward a rhythmic clang that echoes through the village. The air shifts, carrying the sharp scent of charcoal and hot metal, and you spot a low, sturdy building with smoke curling from a hole in its thatched roof. You're in 850 CE, and this is the blacksmith's forge, where sparks fly like tiny comets and iron bends under skilled hands. You step closer, the heat hitting you like a wave, and peer inside, where a blacksmith hammers a glowing blade, his face lit by the forge's fiery glow. You wipe sweat from your brow, muttering, "This is why I stick to air-conditioned offices," and grin at the thought of trying to swing that hammer without setting yourself on fire. Inside, the forge is a world of controlled chaos. The blacksmith, his arms thick as ship's ropes, strikes the iron with precision, each blow sending sparks dancing across the dirt floor. Tools, tongs, hammers, and chisels hang on the walls, their handles worn smooth by years of use. You notice a pile of half-finished blades, their edges dull but promising, and a stack of horseshoes that look ready to outlast the horses. Viking blacksmiths were the backbone of their communities, historical records show, crafting everything from swords to plowshares with techniques so advanced that some of their ironwork rivaled modern steel. You imagine trying to forge a nail, only to end up with a lumpy mess, and decide you're better off watching than participating. Here's a quirky detail: Vikings sometimes buried their blacksmiths with their tools, as if they'd need them in the afterlife to keep Valhalla's weapons sharp. You spot a small hammer on a workbench, its head etched with a tiny rune, and wonder if it's destined for a grave or just a particularly proud smith. You picture the blacksmith pausing mid-hammer to carve that rune, muttering, "This one's for the gods," and you chuckle, earning a glance from an apprentice stoking the fire. He's young, his face smudged with soot, and he looks at you like you're a stray dog who wandered in. You give a sheepish nod, hoping you don't have to explain your lack of blacksmithing credentials. You step closer to the forge, the heat making your cloak feel like overkill. The blacksmith pauses, plunging the blade into a trough of water, and the hiss of steam fills the air like a dragon's sigh. You watch, mesmerized, as he inspects the metal, his eyes narrowing like he's reading a book only he understands. You're tempted to ask him about it, but the language barrier, and his intimidating biceps, keep you quiet. Instead, you notice a small pile of iron nails, each one hand-forged, and think about the ships you saw in the shipyard, held together by these tiny miracles of craftsmanship. Historians still debate how much Viking blacksmiths innovated versus borrowed from other cultures. Did they learn their tricks from Frankish smiths or figure it out on their own? You pick up a stray nail, its weight solid in your hand, and imagine the hours it took to shape it. You're no handyman, your last DIY project probably involved duct tape and regret, but there's something humbling about holding this piece of Viking labor. You set it down quickly when the apprentice glances over, his expression saying, "Don't touch the merchandise." You raise your hands in mock surrender, muttering, "Not trying to steal your nails, kid," and step back to take in the scene. The forged glow paints everything in reds and oranges, and the rhythmic clang feels like the village's heartbeat, steady and strong. Outside, the morning sun is climbing higher, warming the air and cutting through the forge's smoky haze. You hear a goat bleat somewhere nearby, a reminder of the village's everyday life beyond this fiery workshop. You imagine trying to explain this to your friends. "Yeah, I hung out in a Viking forge, no big deal," and grin at how absurd it sounds. The blacksmith starts hammering again, shaping what looks like an axe head, and you feel a pull to stay, to watch the metal transform. But the village is alive with other corners to explore, and the promise of quieter rituals calls you now. You step out of the forge, the clang of iron still ringing in your ears, and head toward the heart of the village, ready for what the day brings next. You step out of the forge's smoky heat, the clang of iron fading as the village's crisp air wraps around you, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. The sun's higher now, painting the fjord in soft golds, but a winter chill lingers, hinting at the long, dark months ahead. You wander past the longhouse, its roof dusted with frost, and find yourself drawn to a small grove where a group of villagers gathers quietly, their breath visible in the cold. They're preparing for a winter ritual, a moment of reverence to honor the gods and ensure the season's hardships don't break them. You're in 850 CE, and this hushed ceremony feels like a secret shared with the trees. You pull your cloak tighter, muttering, "Hope this ritual includes hot cocoa," and grin at the thought of pitching that to these stoic Norsemen. The grove is small, ringed by pines that stand like silent guards. A low stone altar, worn smooth by years of offerings, sits at the center, draped with evergreen boughs and small carvings of ravens, Odin's messengers. A woman with silver-streaked hair leads the ritual, her voice soft but steady, chanting words you can't quite catch. You stand at the edge, trying to blend in, though your modern posture probably screams outsider. The villagers hold small tokens, bone amulets, dried herbs, a polished stone, and place them on the altar, their movements deliberate, almost tender. Historical records, like sagas and archaeological finds, show Vikings performed seasonal rituals to seek favor from gods like Freya for fertility or Thor for protection, especially in winter's grip. Here's a quirky detail: some Viking rituals involved sprinkling animal blood on altars, but this one's tamer, thank goodness, just herbs and whispered prayers. You spot a man placing a sprig of mistletoe on the altar, its pale berries glowing in the sunlight. You imagine him joking, "This better get us through till spring," and you stifle a chuckle, not wanting to disrupt the solemn vibe. The idea of mistletoe, now a holiday cliché, being sacred here makes you smile. Try explaining that to your office secret Santa. You shift your weight, the frost-crunchy grass crackling under your boots, and feel a pang of gratitude for modern heating. The woman's chant grows softer, almost a lullaby, and you notice the villagers' faces, calm, focused, like they're sharing a quiet strength. You're tempted to join in, but without knowing the words, you'd probably sound like you're humming a pop song. Instead, you watch as a young girl, her cloak too big for her small frame, adds a tiny wooden horse to the altar. You wonder if it's for a safe journey or a lost sibling, and the thought tugs at you. Historians still debate how deeply Vikings believed in these rituals. Were they heartfelt pleas or just tradition to hedge their bets against a brutal winter? The question lingers as you catch the woman's eye, her gaze kind but piercing, like she sees right through your modern skepticism. You step closer, drawn by the altar's simplicity. The air feels heavier now, thick with the scent of pine and the faint sweetness of burning herbs. You notice a small fire pit nearby, its flames barely licking the twigs, and imagine the villagers gathering here through countless winters, their hopes etched into these offerings. You're no stranger to rituals, your morning coffee run is practically sacred, but this feels different, grounded in a world where survival wasn't guaranteed. You picture yourself trying to explain your life to these folks. "Yeah, I pray to the Wi-Fi gods daily," and laugh softly, earning a curious glance from the girl with the wooden horse. You mime an apology, and she giggles, her breath puffing in the cold. The ritual winds down, the chants fading into the rustle of leaves and the fjord's distant lapping. The villagers begin to disperse, their faces softer now, like they've set down a weight. You linger, running your fingers over a pine bough, its needles sharp but oddly comforting. The grove feels like a pause, a moment where the village holds its breath before plunging back into the daily grind. You think about the runestones you saw, their stories carved for eternity, and wonder if this ritual will leave a mark too, even if it's just in the villagers' hearts. The sun climbs higher, and the promise of the fjord's open water calls you now, urging you toward the ships and the stars that guide them. You leave the grove, the altar's quiet power still humming in your chest, ready for the next step of this Viking journey.